Fnatic's victory in the final of ESL One Cologne not only won them this CSGO major, but it won them their second back-to-back major. Actually, I'm not quite sure of the wording of that. Does second back-to-back mean you won three and then two of them back-to-back? Okay, it won their second major in a row, which has never been done. No one's ever... Actually, they were the only team to ever repeat, as in win two majors, but now they've won two in a row. And for three of the players, for 60% of the lineup, this is their third major, and there have only been six held. So there have been six majors ever held in Counter-Strike history, and JW, Pronax and Flusher have half of them. And then the five-man lineup in total won two. So this is absolutely incredible stuff when you're talking about the best, biggest, most important tournaments in the history of CSGO. This has just put them on that level, on the highest possible factor, way ahead of anyone else in history. I mean, that's not all that counts. Just because it's the most important, it's the best, the most prestigious, etc., doesn't mean it's all that counts. Listen, other great tournaments, like having great streaks, like the 87-0 of NIP, or winning lots of tournaments, or placing high a lot of times, like other teams have done, EnVyUs, NIP, Very Games, these are all factors that count. But on the top factor, since Fnatic has every other factor, they're ahead in that sense. So incredible performance as far as that goes. Then you look at the fact that for guys like JW, Pronax and Flusher, the context for their careers now is absolutely insane. Because you have to remember, these were guys where early on in their careers, their big results making these finals, not the ones I'm talking about now, were actually kind of flukes. Like they first really got to the top of the scene in terms of JW and Flusher when they were members of this Epsilon lineup, which had four of the members who would later go on to win DreamHack Winter. But in the summer of that year, 2013, out of nowhere, they just came along, made the final of the Swedish Masters. Okay, only Swedish teams there. There was no other Swedish team comparable to NIP. But then they made the final of DreamHack Summer as well, ahead of teams like, your Very Games, Copenhagen Wolves, Clan Mystic, all these, LDLC actually, I think at the time Kenny S was on, all these other good teams, Virtus.pro, made the final, but it was considered kind of a fluke at the time, like a great one-off run, but okay, just Cinderella story. They were never going to be that good. Well, obviously at the end of the year, when they've got Pronax into the lineup, now they make this miracle run to the final of the first major, where everyone was sure it's going to be Very Games and NIP, and whoever wins out of that's going to win the final. They make it to the final, they win the final, incredible shit. And now, despite both of those sick runs being considered in their own context a fluke, in the context of the best teams ever who've won majors, now you add all that in to what they've become now, amazing champions. And it's not that they weren't flukes back then, it's that you see the development. Like, here's the thing, if they hadn't have been flukes, then they were already the best when they won the major. It was no big deal then to keep winning majors later. You're the best, you stayed the best. No, that's the whole point. They were flukes then, but they hinted at maybe some more potential. And a lot of people, when they hinted it, never fulfilled the potential. That's why it remains a fluke. They don't build on it, they don't make it not a fluke, they don't pick it up. This team developed and eventually got the right players, and one day now when they win, we know the difference between these major wins and that one there. We can see that now they are one of the greatest lineups ever to play, if not the greatest. So that's the core. Then you look at the stars they brought in. They brought in Crims and Olof. Obviously Crims wasn't a star at the time, but has definitely developed into one now and had a crucial part to play in winning this title. And not only are they stars, but the way they play together, they're a star combo. Well, this star combo, I think you can now make the case in CSGO history, it's maybe the best ever. Because here's the thing, Get Right and Forest were the standard before, but the key thing about Get Right and Forest is they play such different roles and they don't really interact that much in a game. Whereas the Olofem and Crims combo, first of all, they play sites together fantastically. They play off each other on T-side fantastically. They can both play entry roles, and they have the same strengths in terms of maps. And they've both taken turns to be the best player in the world at different points in time. So overall, just what an amazing context just for that star combo. And at times, they were the stars that pushed them to this title as well. Second major for this star combo back-to-back. Then you look at the fact that this exact five-man lineup has now played in three major finals, and take the other two out, look at only the three that remain, so Pronax, JW, Flusher, those three have played in four of the six major finals ever held in CSGO. I mean, as an org, what a fucking sick accomplishment. As players, what unreal consistency, what unreal runs. Because each run's individual, remember. There's no knock-on effect. That's what fans never realised about NIP's scenario before. The other past finals didn't make them get to the next finals. What's great about CS is you're on top now, but unless you keep evolving, unless you keep matching, unless you keep switching what you're doing, maintaining your strengths here, working to be the best, you will fall off. That happens to teams. So the fact that you can get back to finals again and again like Nip did, in each separate incident, it's amazing and it's wonderful. And how did they do it? And it's magical. Well, when Fnatic's done it and they're getting back and they're the best in a number of these situations, that's even more fucking amazing. There's also the fact that, just before we leave that whole major topic thing, like, if you're a Nip fan and you've been banging on about major finals and that's your one last defense that you could go to because the streak was still alive, and that, like, you know, forget everything else. We still made every major final. Don't now switch up and be like, yeah, but who cares about major finals? It's about 87-0 now, or making top of 30 tournaments in a row. No, mate. You picked the criteria before. Stick with your criteria. Now, when we talk about this tournament, let's just start off early. So in the group stage, they had one of the hard groups because they were going to face in the winners match Na'Vi, and Na'Vi's one of the, I had them number 2 in the world, one of the top 3 teams in the world, have had an amazing last few months of consistency, making finals, winning smaller tournaments, making top 4s, really hard team to beat. They play Na'Vi on Inferno, not the strongest map for either team. Both history on the map is pretty good, and Na'Vi can be very good on that map. And they stomp Na'Vi 16-2, just absolutely shit stomp these guys and fucking wreck them out of the tournament, basically. I mean, not really, because they didn't go out of the tournament, but out of that phase, at least. To where Fnatic are through to the playoffs. Then, you're thinking, okay, well, maybe they're just in peak form now. You obviously then, they managed to get past Luminosity without too much trouble. One of the maps, yeah, there was some issues there. Luminosity gave a great showing, but Fnatic was too good, and even if they'd have lost that map, they would have won the third map. So it wasn't as big an issue as it seemed, even though it was exciting at the time. They get through that series easy enough. It was obviously, in theory, the easiest of the round of 8 matchups. I mean, I would say King wins better than Luminosity, so I think that was the easiest matchup there. So, okay, again, they haven't been tested, really. They had like a match that was close, but again, you know they're going to win there. They've stomped the group. Okay, you think maybe they're just in peak form here. The VP series, now this has to be talked about, because the VP series was in many senses more important than the final. This one they really could have lost. They got wrecked in the first map, Mirage, and they got wrecked in a way where, I mean, Olofmeister had like a Fiflerin type moment where he had like 5 kills. And so they lose the first map, Mirage, then they're on to another classic VP map, Inferno, and VP's ahead and VP's in position to win, and VP's looking like they're going to win. And what wins it from Fnatic? No, it's not that VP broke down and they didn't. VP was still playing well. They was still close rounds. VP was still doing the things that had made them succeed before, playing the aggressive way. What you saw here was incredible mental strength from Fnatic to battle back, to grind back in, to somehow not give up even in the face of like insanely close rounds. And it's so razor thin that you're going to be out of the fucking tournament, beaten 2-0, and you're just out, and VP's going to go on, who knows, he maybe win the tournament. This was great play from Virtus.pro, but just even better play from Fnatic. And somehow, in not good form, playing yourself back into form. I've often said about these sorts of matches when you watch them, for teams like VP, it's not that you played worse towards the end, or like you just fell off in your game. It's that when you're playing a team as good as a team like Fnatic, when you have the advantage, when you're like standing on their throat, you better just crush their windpipe and kill them right then. Because if you keep fucking around at all, like you're still doing well, everything's going great, but you give them any chance to sort of get their breath, recover, just almost like tread water until they get a chance to get up, that's when you're in trouble. I mean, I remember back when VP had their major win, when they beat Nip in the final. The same thing happened there. On the Inferno second game there was a little stretch that Nip had where they started to get back into the game and you were like, wait a minute. And luckily, that time VP was able to close it out and it wasn't an issue. But if a few more rounds had gone Nip's way, I'm talking 2 or 3, they would have been able to get maybe to the late game. They could have gotten to an overtime. Then you open up the third map. Now this is where the danger is. When you're talking about all-time great teams like that Nip lineup and like this Fnatic lineup. Obviously, the whole lineup, comeback rather, is triggered by this godlike timeout. Now, you can obviously put it down to Pronax, but I saw in interviews, like, it sounds like Vuggo, their coach, has something to do with this. So let's just assign a mixture of both, because, I mean, maybe Vuggo calls the timeout, but I'm sure Pronax speaks in the timeout, and they talk to each other, and they figure out what's going on. Whatever they do in these timeouts, even if it's as simple as not even a tactical change or something they've noticed, but just calming down, and then thinking about, like, here's how we're just going to very basically do things, and here's a tiny little tweak. Whatever they do, it works on an unreal level, because in this particular game, we saw it triggered a whole different Fnatic who came back. The Fnatic who went into that timeout were a Fnatic that were heading out of the tournament. We're not going to win that map. We're not going to win that series. We're not going to win it in this tournament. They weren't good enough. But somehow, the team that came back in after that timeout was fucking so clutch. It was absolutely unreal. The kind of mental fortitude they must have to have in that sense is amazing. And I've got to give props to Vogo in this sense, because we've now seen this track record of these timeouts. I mean, obviously I'm going to talk about it later, but we saw another key timeout that won them a really major map later in the tournament, but we've seen it in the past as well. Remember at ESL ESEA Pro League, when Fnatic was playing in the best of 5 final against Cloud9, the first map would have been like a big win for Cloud9, but they had this timeout on T side of Cobble, Fnatic, then they start grinding rounds in. They almost got to win that map, but they lost it just closely. Then later on in the series, the last map, when they were playing against Cloud9 on DOS 2 and Cloud9 was on CT side, they have to take this timeout, they come back, and they just grind their way through these rounds that they have to win round after round after round on T side, and they just go win them all. Same way. They're not just behind loads. They don't really have to grind, but they pretty much have to win rounds in a row, and they just do it all the way through. Whatever switches get thrown there, whatever gets changed slightly, even if it's just attitude, even if it's just mental fortitude of like putting the pieces back together, it's just, we've never seen anything like it in CSGO. There's nothing I've ever seen as good. The closest that can come, almost vaguely, is in 1.6, the Danish team MTW, who was a really tactical team. Their leader was just so brilliant at sort of mentally resetting, and he was often used tactical timeouts himself, that he could always make his teams grind. And so they didn't always do as many sick comebacks as this, didn't win as many tournaments as Fnatic did, but they could always compete at least. You'd never beat them like 16-4. That was just not going to happen in general. They'd always be able to get to like 10, 12 rounds, even in matches they were losing, and they could do these big comebacks. It's the only thing I can think is close, and even then it's not on the magnitude of these comebacks and the effect it has on the tournament, their opponents, and their legacy. I mean, this is just amazing stuff. It's not what we used to see from the old Fnatic. At times they were front runners. Then you look at the fact that in this series, fuck me, Crims was the MVP of this series. He just, on that Inferno game, which is the game that they were going to lose, he carried them on both sides of the maps. He kept them inside, in on the CT side. He did his work on T side to even give him a chance. Amazing play under pressure. I mean, you look at the guy, he looks like a robot. He looks like he's not ever fazed by anything. He doesn't look like he's pleased when he wins around, doesn't look like he's sad when he wins. He has that killer mentality. And for someone who's not a superstar skill player, I mean, he's not a simple, he's not a guardian, like mad flick aim, reflexes, but it's like he just has that mentality along with his style of play of like just plugging away, just trying to do the right thing. Did that work? No? Okay. Try and do the correct decision next time, whatever the circumstances I'm faced with, just trying to make the correct decisions, do the right thing for my team, contribute something here, and it all adds up. And then when he has form, like in these games, he's just grinding away, just chipping away at the enemy. And it wasn't working much in the first half, sure, even though he was doing it. But when all the pieces came together, the rest of his team started to wake up. They started to do things. He starts to get some of those kills where the same exact move before might not have gotten a kill. Now he's dominating the game. So all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, this guy's carrying this game. Then you look, okay, Olofmeister, map 1, 5 kills. Now, that storyline that's about to be written when you do that is like, you cost your team the series, or if your team even comes back and wins like they did now, yeah, but you got carried, even you're supposed to be the best player in the world. How could you get carried by your team, later on? Yeah, except you look at the score at the end of the series after 3 maps, and he was sat on 50 kills. So that means map 1, 5 kills. Next 2 maps, 45 kills, split over the 2. So even if we split it evenly, like 22.5 kills per map, that's like superstar numbers, to do 22 kills in a map, 2 maps in a row. What we actually saw, ironically, considering this was his worst game of his career, because of the way he bounced back and then performed over 2 out of the next 3 maps, so 6% of the series, although obviously not identical amount of rounds played, so not really, 60% of the series roughly, what we basically saw was he showed us his worst game and then showed us that he is a superstar still. He is still the best player in the world in totality, looking at months and months, not just this tournament. And he showed a superstar kind of return to form that like no one else could do except the superstar. No one else but the best player in the world could turn it around like this and then have an impact. And then what happened once you got to Cobblestone was the kills he was getting there were the superstar kills. Here's a key point I always try to make about the superstars, is that the superstars, their kills, the number on the screen, means more than the kills of, say, like, the middle, the third or fourth best player on a team. Because some of the kills they're getting are just trade kills, or maybe they just shoot a guy who's low health. What the superstar can do in terms of getting his kills that some of those lesser players can't, is he can get the hardest possible kills from situations which should be unwinnable or against the best players. And you saw some rounds on the cobblestone game, where he just got some kills with like super low health, where like he's almost certainly going to die to this guy unless he insta headshots him, or he has to like quickly get some sick reflex jump on this guy. He got some of those which just won rounds entirely, just one kill sometimes, just turned a whole round for Fnatic's side. Then, when they get through this miracle semi-final, they get to the final, okay. They're facing the hottest team in the tournament. Perhaps the hottest team in the world when you consider IM Gamescom, and now this tournament here where they've beaten Na'Vi, they've beaten TSM, who are both playing well in those series. They've beaten them, and they're beating them on their maps as well, and now they get to the final. In theory, EnVyUs at this point has the form. They should, if you look at the way the tournament played out, probably win the tournament now, when you consider what happened to Fnatic not getting tested early, then how badly the semi-final went. And then you look at the maps. Basically, Fnatic has to play EnVyUs on some of EnVyUs' best maps. They're playing them on their best maps. They're taking it to them. And EnVyUs gets this sick lead. EnVyUs is playing really well on map 1, does too. What happens? Fnatic do another super sick comeback. This one was even more unreal. Crims has the 1v3 wins. They do the timeout. And again, this is just a fucking unreal timeout. We're talking like god tier comeback. This is also another map where Crims was just a monster again. He just again delivered this quiet performance that you only start to realise towards the end of the map. Like, look at the fucking impact he's having round after round in situation after situation. I mean, this tournament even shoulders this fucking, all these insane Deagle kills. You didn't even think of him as that sort of a pistol player in the past. Just amazing performance. Then you have to talk about Flusher. Now, over the whole tournament, Flusher was probably the MVP. I've never seen... He usually in the past has been streaky. This time he consistently had a big tournament. And in the final, it's not just the kills he got, it's the impact kills. He just got so many of those just Flusher things rounds that really did tip things and win the game for Fnatic and allow them to win. Where at times, Olofmeister, again, wasn't always dominating. Unreal performance from him. Then you think to the fact that in this tournament, they were able to essentially win this tournament thanks to Terra's side play. Now, here's a key point to make, as I was trying to reference before, but all the different majors they've won and all the different top performances they've had, is that you can't look at teams like NiP and teams like Fnatic and teams like EnVyUs and just act as though they're a static team that doesn't change and retain the same strengths at every point in history. They don't, they change. Now, one of the flaws of NiP now is that they try to play to the same strengths as they did in the early days, which no longer are strengths, or are strengths relative to their opponents, at least the best ones, or even are strengths relative to who they are as players anymore and the personnel in their lineup. Now, what Fnatic's been able to do repeatedly throughout history is change their strengths and change the style of the team to fit them. So we think of the team, I think of the best Fnatic, the one that dominated in late 2014, was a super CT-sided team who was amazing on like 3 key maps, which was Inferno, Cache, and Mirage. And beyond that, on T-side, they actually would sometimes have trouble executing. They had a lot of trouble grinding on T-sides. They had a lot of trouble stringing together rounds on T-side. They won by having these monster 11, 12 round CT halves. And then what they would do is they were so far ahead, it didn't take much on T-side. And so then all Pronex had to do was call a couple of trick plays, a couple of switch-ups, get them over the line with 2 or 3, and they'd have won the game. Well, that's not the team you see now. That's not the team that won Katowice. That was a totally different one. Now Olofmeister's the star player, whereas it was Crims and JW before. Now Olofmeister's the star player, sometimes joined by Crims, sure, but not as much. He's beasting. He's beasting on T-sides. He's beasting on other maps as well. Now suddenly they're getting more aptitude on DOS 2 all of a sudden. Now their Inferno falls away a bit. Cache is still there, but it's different the way they're playing it now because the map's evolved in terms of how play. Mirage goes entirely out the window. They start going towards Cobblestone. Then later on, suddenly they're playing Overpass. It's totally changing the dimension of the team. And now this Fnatic is super sick at grinding. They're stringing together all these T-side rounds. They've got a sick entry fragger. They've got Crims back to being a strong player, but more in the supportive role than when he was the superstar. They're doing all these timeouts. They're making the correct decisions. This is a totally different map pool. This is a totally different Fnatic. It looks like the same one because it's the same players, same kind of success, but they're winning in a different way, in a different meta against different teams. That's what's astonishing about this performance. And that's why, in a way, it's a masterpiece, especially because this major they won Now, I can't say it was the worst performance, because in a weird way, the first one they won when it was JW, Pronax, and then the other guy, Schneider and Devilwalk, the one where it was the fluke one where they won DreamHack Winter, in a way that was the worst one, obviously, because up until the final, they didn't really play like God tier CS, and they didn't have to play that many great teams. But if you consider the other major they won, where Olof carried them for a lot of it, but they were stellar otherwise for most of the tournament, and you consider their periods of dominance in the past, if you look at this Fnatic lineup, this is not the best they've ever played. Just objectively and relative to who they're playing against and the era, etc. But despite it not being their peak, despite them having moments of weakness, like the semi-final and then the first map of the final, where they could not only lose, but maybe lose and blow the whole series and actually look much weaker than very strong teams, despite all of this, they've won another fucking major. Despite all of this, they're having these magical halves and maps where they can seemingly overcome anything. They can come up with any play from any economic disadvantage, from any numbers disadvantage. Somehow these magical plays are coming out. I mean, imagine how much fun it must be to play in a lineup like this, where not only can you do these sick comebacks, you can do these things, but it's all based on team play. It's all based on this great intuitive sense and this trust that if this guy does something, I know he's got my back here and I can make a play here and he'll know what to do based on that. And that can't all be practiced. That can't all be spoken and known. Some of it's just intuitive. Some of it's unconscious, and it's fucking beautiful when it happens, when it plays like that. Then you consider that the strengths even of the team. Imagine how much fun that must be, where you could be the star player, you could be the best player for a couple of months now, but you know if you drop off, as long as you can find a way to contribute otherwise within your role, someone else in the team can take over and be the best for this map, be the best for this series, be the best for the tournament. Flusher can save Olofmeister every now and then. Likewise, he knows if he saves him enough times, then Olofmeister's going to come alive for a map because he's still going to be in the tournament, and then he's going to carry and dominate the whole game. JW can have halves where he does nothing, but he can still potentially win that map and get to a map where he can do something. What a fucking amazing team this must be playing, because they're an amazing team in all these respects. Such a unique ability that I've never seen in CSGO, to switch who your stars are relative to what you need at that moment and the meta. I mean, we've never seen anything that's so unique. Then you look at the fact that they do have all these players who have strengths in different areas. And that provides this consistency because of the fact that if this guy's not got it going, hey, this guy's going to give it to you in a different way. And if he hasn't got it going, then we got to go to this third guy and hope that he has something for us. And if not, we do a timeout, we do false buys here, then we're doing intelligent, normal economic saves here. You've got to be able to shift all the pieces. You've got all these spinning plates, and they managed to keep enough up there that somehow it works for them. It's actually, I don't even know how they're doing it. I'm pretty sure they don't know how they're doing it. It's just fucking unreal. I even get the people who doubt Fnatic, okay? I mean, people always claim now, after the fact when they win, oh, well, it was obvious they were going to win, they were favourite, they're the number one team. That's not what people say coming into these tournaments. Every big tournament that they don't win, people immediately write them off. They're like, okay, right, they're finally done. Okay, it's over for them. The team that won's the hottest team now. Navi's now the top team. TSM's now the top team. Oh, this new EnVyUs lineup's the top team. Oh, Mouse Sports is coming. Oh, Kingwin's going to come. They have all these people. Oh, Nips winning a scrims. They have all these reasons as to why Fnatic won't win, and yet Fnatic still continue to win. So at the moment, they hadn't won the last tournament before. Doesn't matter, still win this major here. They've won 3 of the last 4 tournaments, and they're not even in peak form. They're not even blasting everyone out the server. They have occasional moments of brilliance, but otherwise they just get through the hard matches. That's the key thing. It's that they don't play super bad. They don't always play super good, but the consistency, the consistent level they can reach again and again, no one else can match. When you're talking about 2 or 3 tournaments in a row, 2 months in a row, 6 months in a row. Not only have they won 3 of the last 4 tournaments, they've won all the big tournaments this year. They won the 2 majors and ESL ESEA Pro League, the biggest tournaments. They're almost a lock to make every final, and they've never placed below top 4 in all of 2015. We're talking double-digit number of tournaments attended, never been below top 4, never gone out in a group stage. This is just fucking absolutely unreal stuff. And so, in a weird sense, with all the weaknesses taken into account, with the difficulties they had to overcome, Virtus.pro, they had to play against EnVyUs, these super hot teams, super informed teams who both could have won this tournament most certainly, somehow they come out again and win another major, win back-to-back majors, win half the majors for some of them ever held. Just absolutely astonishing stuff. That's why in some senses this was their major masterpiece. If you'd like to play fantasy esports, such as Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and in fact, if you'd have played last week, you could have played ESL One Cologne. I made some teams. Obviously had some Fnatic players in there. Didn't have Flusher, sadly. Then you can play Alpha Draft. There's a link in the description box below. And they also produce a podcast, which there'll be a new episode of that coming up any day soon with Richard Lewis. And I always put it in the description box of my videos. So thank you, Alpha Draft.